Yeah, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm really delighted to be here and have the opportunity to talk about my favorite subject, the boundless possibilities of Web3. So, over the next 30 minutes, I want to do three things. I want to share briefly some of my thoughts concerning the inventive attributes of Web3. I want to delve into my personal experience of immersion into Web3, particular VR and the metaverse, and on its application for societal benefits. And then I want to touch on some specific examples that demonstrate the ways in which novel decentralized technologies, blockchain, which is now easily accessible, are currently enhancing and have the potential to further improve lives. Because it's a keynote, my colleague Matt, he's going to keep an eye on the chat, which is on the right of you. And if you drop any questions in there or any thoughts, he will move the questions to the Q&A and he'll answer any technical points you might have. And remember, we're live. And just like a Web3 Twitter space, you can use the emojis down below to let us know how you feel throughout the session. So with all the housekeeping done, what I want to do is I want to dive into the session. So Web3, I always like to start with Web3, let's talk possibilities, the boundless possibilities of Web3. Web3, with its amalgamation of technology and culture, those two elements are crucial, I believe has set in motion a revolution that is reshaping our world in profound ways. For me, Web3 represents a transformative shift that extends far beyond the realms of the internet as we know it today, unlocking new avenues for innovation, collaboration, and empowerment. From the decentralized finance and non-fungible tokens to decentralized governance and peer-to-peer networks, I know you will agree with me that Web3 is opening up a realm of untapped potential, enabling individuals to gain and regain control over their data and participate actively in shaping this new digital landscape. So as we navigate this ever-evolving and ever-changing digital frontier, it is essential that we take time to recognize the significance of it and its implications for the future. Remember to see Web3 as a catalyst for democratization, offering a decentralized alternative to traditional centralized systems, fostering transparency, inclusivity, and trust. For me, by leveraging blockchain technology and decentralized protocols, Web3 holds the promise of creating a more equitable and decentralized internet ecosystem, where us, users, are not mere consumers, but active contributors. The Web3 revolution, where the boundaries of possibility and the potential for innovation knows no bounds, really is an exciting time. It's filled with uncharted territories and endless opportunities waiting to be explored by me and you and everybody that encounters Web3. So from the innovative attributes of Web3 onto my first introduction into the Web3 tools. A journey that started with Web3. From my first experience of Web3, I knew it had transformational potential. VR doesn't just provide opportunities for people to experience alternative realities, exploring the metaverses. It offers new dimensions to our existing reality, reinventing the ways we communicate, the way we can collaborate, and the way we can empathize. The immersive nature of VR allows for greater engagement and connection than ever before. It's more than just video calls or messages on a screen that you sometimes hear people talk about. In VR, you can collaborate with others in real time in a shared space, which mimics the dynamics of a physical presence. which is having profound implications. It offers us a solution to geographical constraints that hampered global collaboration and sometimes maintained inequalities. Through using VR, we can place people in the same room with colleagues or classmates, regardless of their location. Moreover, for me, VR can foster empathy because it gives us the opportunity, as I like to say, to walk in the footsteps of others. We can experience different perspectives and situations in a visceral way that a book or a movie can't provide. I spent 2 years leading a VR company that enabled professionals to walk in the footsteps of abused children and victims of domestic abuse. We evidenced through data that if you took professionals into the life of children through VR and engaged the professionals thinking and feeling, which is the only thing you can do when you engage with VR, you could absolutely secure behavior changes in the professionals. For instance, training teachers via VR to give them a greater understanding of what's behind the behavior of a child who's experienced abuse, which meant teachers worked harder to keep the disruptive child in the classroom, which positively impacted their life outcome. We also evidenced that if you took police officers and put them into VR and trained them that way, you could impact how quickly they took action when they were called to an incident of domestic abuse, which previously they might have given 1 or 2 warnings. But through having that experience and the lived experience, walking in the footsteps of that victim or the child that was in that space, that turned them around, and it meant their behavior was very different. And that means the victims were protected more quickly. So from VR and the metaverse, I want to share 4 case studies with you. All of those case studies are utilizing my favorite tool, the blockchain technology. So let me introduce you to them one at a time. My first case study is about Ben. Now, all of these case studies, if I can get the right slide, all of these case studies are real life case studies. So Ben is a person who's very close to me. At 20, while Ben was studying in Germany, he suffered a severe brain injury from a tragic accident. The accident damaged Ben's right caudal, his prefrontal and frontal lobes. And I'm sure you all know, these are the parts of the brain responsible for rational thought, executive decision-making, memory, and emotional intelligence. This accident has shaped his life, causing numerous challenges which are becoming worse as he ages. As you can imagine, Ben has complicated health needs, and he finds himself regularly having to reshare his story, or trying to. On many occasions, he has to ask his mum to step in and share his story. These issues also mean that Ben can't travel unless he travels with someone who knows his full medical history, in case something happens and he needs to access health services. Ben's life is restricted because he doesn't carry his health record around with him. If his health record, dating all the way back to the accident, was stored on the blockchain, accessible via a wallet, he would have much more control over his own life and be less dependent on his mum to tell his story and get him the services that he needs. Ben's acquired brain injury has also meant he can no longer hold down full-time employment. This means every 2 to 3 years, Ben goes through an assessment of need to see if he qualifies for disability support from the UK government. He's currently in the process of filling this form out again, which is what sparked me to write about this. Because can you believe it? That form that Ben has to fill in is a paper form. I sometimes want to shout quite loudly. He has acquired brain injury, and you want him to complete a paper form and ensure that it aligns with what he sent you 3 years ago. Now, I know we have to check the system and do those checks and balances to make sure people aren't being fraudulent. But if Ben's form was stored on the blockchain as a permanent record, one that can't be altered, it's immutable, every couple of years, Ben's support team could help him add to the existing form. But as it stands, Ben is disempowered every time he has to be assessed because his mum has to step in and do the paperwork. Now, Ben's over 50 and his mum is now over 80. Who's going to do this in the future for Ben? The blockchain could give Ben more power over his own life, provide the state with assurance over the accuracy of the information because it would have been there from the beginning, and then doctors would add to that, and it would reduce assessment costs. There's a win-win everywhere here. So I want to jump from Ben to my next case study. My next case study is about 125 people who survive the 23-mile journey across the English Channel in a small boat from France to the UK, and they arrive in a place called Kent. Now, this is the 125 survivors who do that. Many don't survive. Now, I'm talking about 125 souls. Now, that might not seem a lot because I'm actually talking about 125 souls each day. 45,756 every 365 days reach the UK shores and are picked up and taken to shelter, which on the surface sounds perfect. People travel the shores, they're picked up and they're taken to shelter. But a shelter in which they're not allowed to leave to work. They can leave to go out and to visit the shops or to get fresh air and exercise, and the children will end up going to school, but they're not allowed to leave to work. And they can't do that until their right to live in the UK are confirmed, a process which can take anything from 6 to 24 months. So throughout this time, 6 to 24 months, they're not allowed to work and they have to become economically dependent on the state. Today, in the UK, employers are crying out for qualified personnel, teachers, carers, doctors, lawyers, domiciliary carers, and so on. And many people who live in the shelter could take up these roles, but they can't take them up because they have no proof of right to live in the UK or no proof of their qualifications in the specific area. Yes, when they left home, when they rushed out seeking safety, they forgot to grab their documents and their qualifications. And even if they did, they probably would have lost them on that journey. Our collective focus should be moving to the use of the blockchain to store identity documentation and qualifications. Because once we do that for everybody, it's the norm. There are so many gains, but in particular to this group of people, they could immediately be released into the world of work and be economically independent. They could have a higher self-esteem and they could be much more engaged in the community. So sticking with the theme of qualifications and certificates and the use of the blockchain, I want to introduce you to my daughter. Best not tell her though, but my daughter is the first generation from my whole family to go direct from school to university. More on that in a moment. As a young child, she was assessed and given a certificate to confirm she has dyslexia. But guess what has happened? If you guessed that I or her or she has lost the certificate, you're correct. We've moved home a few times in her 23 years, and at some point, we forgot to put the certificate in a safe place. Now, unless I pay to have her assessed again, she doesn't qualify for additional time in exams at university. Now, I can afford to pay those additional costs, even though I shouldn't have to, but some might not be able to. In fact, there are thousands of people who wouldn't be able to do that, to fund a second assessment. And as a result, their child would be negatively impacted for the rest of their life. And if you think, anyone out there thinks I'm overstating this point, just look at every job board in which employers are asking for degrees for a role, whether it is needed or not. And without that additional time in that exam or on those assignments, my daughter's degree would be not as good. And therefore, her life outcomes are impacted. Employers would look at her 2-2 versus her 2-1 or versus her first. Yes, you guessed it. There's a simple solution and you've heard it before. Their assessment certificates could be on the blockchain, accessible via her wallet. She could carry it. She could give it to who she wanted. They could access just that, just by showing them her kind of cupboard of certificates. It doesn't mean she shows them all of it. She could just show that one, and any institution could get it. So for my daughter, I'm going to take us to our final case study. And so from daughter to mother, as I said earlier, my daughter is the first of my whole family generation to go direct from school to university. So I want to talk a little bit about my experience. So I was an unlucky child. I was born into a really abusive family. So after suffering many years of abuse, and at the grand age of 10, I went into what we call in the UK the care of the government. I spent 8 years living in foster homes, children's homes, boarding schools, independent units, constantly moving around. I know they're quite funny names for places that are supposed to be my home. Anyway, that isn't the point that I want to make. Because of my experience, I only have 3 pictures of myself between the age of 0 and 12, and 4 pictures of myself between the ages of 12 and 17. Seriously, I have 7 pictures of my first 17 years. Take a moment and think about how many pictures do you have of yourself during those first 17 years? Or how many pictures do you have of your children or of their children in their first 17 years, or your nieces or nephews? By the way, I also have 0 certificates of my attendance at any camp, club, brownies, sports badge, swim club, any educational outcomes between the ages of 0 to 18. So whilst my life between 0 to 18 was very colourful, and the experiences I had, the places I lived, the people I met, I have no physical evidence to share my story. I'm an empty vessel, which is emotionally difficult because life is about our history and our stories. And whilst we might think this just impacts me and the next generation, it won't. It doesn't. It affects my daughter, as she doesn't have that history to look at of me, to compare me as a child to her as a child. Does she look like me? Does she have my characteristics? She doesn't have any of that. So it does have significant impacts. In fact, when I tried to tell her my story, because we often learn from looking at images, to her, my life started from 18, or those that were stored in memories. And again, this isn't just me. Just in the UK itself, and we're one of like 193 countries, 82,500 children, 1% of the British population, are raised in the British government care system. Now, the blockchain could be mine and their memory box, accessible at any point for sharing with those near and dear to me. It could contain everything that is important, which is so important, especially as a child when you move places or schools or homes a lot. You could have all of that captured. And therefore, when you go on to adulthood, you actually feel that you have that evidence to show to people. So I hope these examples, they have been short and happy to talk about them more, but I just wanted to give that quick insight. I hope that they have given you an understanding of why I personally believe in the blockchain. Its ability to free people from oppression, to give people control over their identity, the means to be economically independent. Imagine not being able to fend for yourself or to feed or to feel that you're able to provide for yourself and your family. Not to be able to have your history. To be able to be freed from disadvantage. With all of these gains, I really really believe that everybody should be an advocate of the blockchain. So in the Whistle Stop Tour, I've shared the lives of 4 individuals who have or could be positively transformed by these advancements in technology. This is what this channel is all about, sharing innovative ideas and real-life examples as they unfold in real time. So remember, regularly tune into this channel and become an active participant in our collective quest to discover and showcase the remarkable changes that are being brought about by this ongoing revolution. And finally, if you have any examples that you have seen or you've implemented and you want to come and share with them with us, just drop me a DM and we can talk and bring you into a live session one day. So with that, thanks for letting me share those thoughts with you. And let's hop over and see if we have any questions. So we have a couple of questions that I'm going to pick up here. So one, what do you think is the hold up for medical records on the blockchain? Do you think it's about adoption on a broad scale or something else? So I think if you talk like a while ago, so if you look back on the channel, we had a series on the health systems and the health systems adoption or potential adoption of the Web3 technology. And I really do invite you to go have a listen to that. And we had 2 great guests, Christopher and Sharonda. They talked all about their experience, but also their vision as to what we could do and how we can utilize the blockchain. I think it's about, I mean, for us in the UK, where we have a national health service, where you could have at a national level, the government adopting the blockchain to then use as a vehicle to place. And it might be that you start at an early age. Those who are born from, ideally, my aspiration, those born from 2024, their records started to go onto the blockchain. And you could start from then and then go backwards to start placing records on the blockchain. But I think that that's not where we are at the moment. There's not that adoption of the blockchain. I think it's not going to still be for a few years. I think it's both hearts and minds, to be honest. I think it's so fundamentally different. And to take such a big change as to put records on the blockchain, especially when for all the centuries in the UK, we have had control, or one institution has had control of all the health records. That is a massive cultural shift. So I think we need more and more examples of how the blockchain are being used by certain parts of the health service to record data about equipment. Some are using it to show the channel of items being moved. So the supply chain is being used on the blockchain. So I think we need to see those. Then when we see those, and then we need to get that government adoption. So I think hearts and minds is in the main that's stopping people. It's those 2 factors. And so we're only get broader when that we can have more and more examples at both a national level and then on an international global level that they can be shared as well. So what do you think about photo albums on the blockchain or the personal things that you wish to keep on the blockchain? Well, obviously I am a fan of that. Now, for those people who don't know, if you are in the care system in the UK and in any country, you have a record. And the state, well, the individual place in which you're looked after owns that record. And then you move and that record is then transferred and then updated. But of all of the things that are contained in that record, they don't contain photos. Now, photos are our history. And now even more that we move to digital photos, it's even easier in a sense for them to get lost because even parents won't get them printed all the time. And so I think it's even more important that we find that space for every person to store their own photo images of themselves throughout their whole life. So I think definitely I'm really comfortable with that, and I would hope that we'll do that. I mean, we store them in the cloud now, and so it's just that next step. I mean, storing them in the cloud, everyone, I mean, they can get to. If you put them in your filing cabinet, your blockchain, only you can get to that, and then you will use that to be able to show people. So I don't think anyone should be scared of using the blockchain to be able to house them. Do you think governments will start adopting blockchain for services like you've discussed, or do you think it will be more up to the private sector? I would love it to be the public sector, because I am a woman who has worked in the public sector for so many years, and I literally every week I post about the public sector and how they can use the blockchain or aspects of Web3 for that very point, that we can help drive a greater understanding. But I think one of the issues is the public sector is starved of resources. Again, I'm going to talk about the UK, but in all countries, it is reducing the money that is spent on public services. So what happens is the money that is spent gets dedicated to delivering the services and less around research and development. Where on the other end, you say private sector, and private sector, they know their livelihood, their long-term future depends on that investment in R&D, research and development. And therefore, they significantly invest in it. So for me, it is a plea to the public sector, look at what your private sector colleagues are doing, because actually what happens in the public sector is they then move to get advice from the private sector as to how they personally, their organization can shift to adopt these the new technologies and the new culture. So for me, it's saying, however tightly pressed you are, we need to find a way to give back to the public sector that time to invest in R&D. Now, one of the ways how I like to do that is to actually look internally to your workforce. The public sector has a huge and diverse workforce. So if you're in local government, you might have people who are teachers, social workers, refuge collectors, planning, accountants, lawyers, every sector you could think of. Librarians all work in the public sector in a local government. What I would do if I was a chief exec of those now, we've been really tightly strapped with resource, I would charge the leaders to look internally as to who are Web3 users in their company, who is using this technology, whether generally in their own spare time, whether they are creating projects, whether they are like some of the founders who have created the NFT projects on my wall. They've done that in their spare time whilst also setting up and running their own business. The same you will find in the world of the public sector. So look inwards, look at who are in your workforce, find out, invite them to come and tell you how they are using Web3. What do they find appealing about it? What has brought them to Web3? What do they think is possible in the realms? Because then you're asking people who work in the sector to say, right, you know this sector, you're now in this Web3 environment, share with us your ideas, however small or big. And I think start small. Don't think that you've got to solve it all. But think about what you could do on a small scale that could really change. I mean, all local governments, I mean, they have customer accounts with every resident that is in their area. Every resident pays council tax. Every resident is registered to vote. Well, you've got so much opportunity to then reach out to your residents. So you don't even have to just look inwards to your organization and who works in the Web3. You can reach further. Reach out to your communities. Get your elected members to actually reach out to their communities that have elected them, to find out what they know about Web3 and how they're using it. Because you will probably find businesses within your area are using the Web3 technology, and some of them are Web3 startups. Collaborate with them, bring them in to find out. So if they are doing it for a business purpose and they are making money from that, then we shouldn't be shying away from that. We should be utilizing their experience to say, okay, so how do we now use this in our libraries? How do we now use this in our customer service center? Every local authority has a customer service centre, and every elected member wants that to be nearly a 24/7. It can't be because it's not affordable. But actually, we now have chatbots. We now have AI. There are so many different ways that you can be using that. And that's not to remove roles, it's to change roles. Yes, utilize that AI, utilize the automation to get processes working more smoothly for your residents when they ring up to register to vote, to pay council tax, to pay fines, to book on anything. But actually, you could take those staff who are sitting on those phone lines and you could turn them into frontline workers, working directly with the public, helping you serve them differently and better. Because the more time that they get from being served by whether a community warden or a planning officer in a local authority area, planners are so in demand. Well, the more they had more time, there were more of them, and they had more time to talk to people, then actually planning processes would be improved. Imagine if you put all of the planning applications in the history of your borough onto the blockchain. There are so many disputes in planning. Actually, you could remove those disputes by having them on the blockchain. It would be transparent, it would be immutable, and therefore, again, you are removing a cost because you have to invest in that cost. So, sorry, the question was, do you think governments will start adopting it before, or do you think it will be more the private sector? I think the private sector are there, they've jumped in, they're excited by it, and I think the public sector, who are excited by it, will always struggle to have the resource to invest in it. So I would say more private sector will be found in the space to start with, but I hope that we can entice more and more people in the public sector to jump into the space. So I think that is all of, okay, I've got another question. Are there dangers and risks that may prevent governments from adopting blockchain? I mean, I think some of it is it's new, isn't it? So whenever we've done anything new, there is, we actually don't fully understand all the dangers of it. So we look at something and we think, no, we're going to stay away, or we're going to push away from that until it's been tried and tested. And actually, that's why sometimes governments or particularly public sector could lose out, because actually it's being tested in different environments. So actually, we do again need that investment in R&D to come and help test it, so that we can see that it's fit for purpose in all areas. So, but I think in terms of the risks, I mean, the risks are that people will worry about the risks, about what are the risks. But I mean, I have to say, in the record keeping of the NHS service at the moment, we have risks and we identify what they are and we mitigate them. So yes, we will find risks. But actually, my focus here isn't to say what are all of those risks. My focus is to say, like any good leader, your role is to do kind of those assurance, to have those risk assessments done, and to identify mitigating practices. Because there is nothing that we're implementing at the moment that doesn't require mitigation, especially around data. At the moment, we have a health data system and a local authority data system, and everyone is being charged with making them interoperable. The risks associated with that are significant, are actually the ones that are stopping it happening at pace. And where it is, it's only being tested in small places, and it only works in one local authority and one NHS service rather than across the whole country. So there's risks everywhere. So my answer is yes, there are risks. Please apply all of the practices you do in the adoption of any new technology undertake analysis, identify the risks, and then develop the appropriate mitigation actions for that. So it's been great to share with you some of my thoughts. As I said, Social Good Channel is about talking everything that we see is opportunities in social good, whether that be around how individual cases can be used, how it can be used in large scale. And so if you're out there and you've got a great example and you think, I'd love to share this, then as I say, DM me or DM anyone in the team at Metacampus and literally come share that with us. I would love to hear it. And we will keep bringing you new examples of how the Web3 new ecosystem is actually here to help us all live better and differently. And on that, I'm going to bring it to a close. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great afternoon.